The New Sound is the debut solo album of Black Midi frontman Jordy Griep. The album was revealed very soon after the sudden and upsetting breakup of the beloved progressive rock group. Griep has been building up a collection of live songs with a new band back in the Windmills venue in which Black Midi started throughout 2024. Hell, Griep had even started building songs of his own since before he formed this new band. The Magician and Lumps, now renamed to Walk Up, were Black Midi live staples while touring for Hellfire, and they ended up on this album. However, I was quite surprised to find this led to a solo album this quickly. The New Sound was revealed alongside the release of a single, Holy Holy. Boy oh boy, what a song. This is one of the most hotly discussed songs released this year, and for damn good reason. It is a Latin-infused jazz rock banger that, while energetic, is more of a ballad than anything. The track is split in two halves. In the first half, Griep's character is some big shot, taking a liking to a woman at a bar and treating her generally poorly. In the second half, we are given a total twist, and it's revealed that this big shot act was staged and that this woman is actually a sex worker given incredibly specific instructions. The minor details and intense pettiness of these instructions really crack me up, such as when he asks her to kneel the whole time to make him look taller. And the song ends with Griep's character saying they'll meet again the same time next week and the next week after that, implying that paying to look cool and seemingly failing to do so is a regular thing for this character. I think this sudden shift in how we view the character from sexist douche to sexist loser is the perfect introduction to the world and character Griep was preparing to introduce us to. Second single and opener, Blues, was another phenomenal track, run by quick, spiraling, and dizzying guitars. This is one of the most disorienting tracks that Griep has ever been a part of, and I mean that in the best of ways. I love how chaotic it continues to become over time. The drums are very eclectic and run the track into mania frequently. I'm very unsurprised to hear former Black Midi drummer Morgan Simpson was on this track. The drums have his name written all over them. Blues also acts as a description of this album's character in complete detail from the third person. A complete and total loser, imbecile, and in many ways, incel. I can imagine the person being described reciting lines in the mirror such as, "You have a bigger dick than any man who's ever lived, and you can come more than 100 stallions." It's a very funny bit of imagery. The track ends with the message of this loser trying to be some big shot completely being in vain, as eventually he will die. Soon he'll disappear. That's the only fact. These two singles laid the groundwork for the character and tone of the album so excellently, and I was very excited to see it grow through the whole project. And initially, with the second track, Terra, that excitement was very well met. One of my favorite lyrical moments on the album, it shows a man trying to create something to live far longer than he will. He describes his life's work as a museum of human suffering, which he clarifies is exactly what it sounds like. I love the verse in which this character wonders if the saints above will remember him and let him into heaven because they've seen his museum. Unfortunately, I did quickly lose interest in the lyrical contents of the album, as I found it quickly just diluted into mostly being about this character's one-sided, unrequited love with an unnamed woman. And I don't think Griep's take on this tried-and-true album narrative is all that interesting despite his detailed wording. On Through a War, the character gets drunk with friends and tells a likely false story of him being this dictator ruling with an iron fist, yet offering his love only grace, saying that he would disembowel himself just to hold her hand. As if Waltz has a very simple lyrical structure, with each line being to do this and to do that, to take you out, to get married, to make you mine. Eventually this transforms into the character essentially wanting to be cucked by this woman as though it's the only way their relationship can be wholesome at all. All this, but only for an hour. The lyrical contents of this album culminate in the frankly boring ballad closer, If You Are But a Dream, where Griep's character desperately yearns for this woman one final time. It's a very anticlimactic way to end the arc of this album, and it's really just the least interesting in a sea of metaphors. It also doesn't help that the track instrumentally isn't nearly long enough to grow in any substantial way. Having one cohesive narrative with Greep's style of writing felt like a dream come true going into the album, but it quickly ended up really exposing me to some of his writing's weaknesses. He is incredible at making these creative vignettes and stories about bad people and what drives them. The structure of an album like Black Midi's final release, Hellfire, definitely aided this skill. However, focusing on one story for an hour-long album shows how repetitive his writing can become. How much of it is really fueled by vulgar imagery and intentional vagueness. Despite their intense creativity, the stories he constructs are really simple and are not fit to take up the full length of this album. However, I do still find this album's writing much better than most other albums because even if I'm mainly talking about its weaknesses, at least it actually does give me something substantial to discuss and think about while listening. Even if the lyrics underwhelmed me, it matters very little when Jordy Greep is the one singing them. Perhaps the biggest improvement from Black Midi to Solo Greep is that he really is focusing on progressing his voice. His hyper-specific, accented crooning, the occasional growls, his sass and attitude while talking in character, his odd inflections when singing. My god, I really love this man's voice. I absolutely adore how in the end of Terra, his voice just rises and rises, all culminating in an incredible scream that lasts just the right amount of time. Around the 2-minute mark in Walk Up, there is a layered yelp of the track's title in a way reminiscent to a Yes vocal delivery, before a total tone shift with a Black Country New Road sounding saxophone solo. Certainly another favorite moment of mine on the album. Later on in the track, as it gets louder and louder, Greep really lets his growling take over, and it is so damn satisfying. There's a brief point in the first third of Through a War with a layered hook, which I'm really sad never returns later in the song because it is so lovely. When the organs come in towards the end of the vocal part of As If Waltz, Greep hums along and it is equally lovely. And who can forget his delivery in the last third of The Magician? I can't even describe how amazing it is, I'll just say it gives me goosebumps. So pretty much, as long as Jordy Greep is the singer on a track in this album, I will end up quite enjoying it. It's been a long time since I've felt such frustration with a song the same way I do for Motorbike. I don't hate the song or even really dislike it, it just frustrates me to no end. Instrumentally, this is an absolute album highlight. The flowing cascade of sporadic drums, glistening pianos, and guitars absolutely drenched in feedback feel like they belong on a video of someone motorcycling. And the second half of the song feels like an amalgamation of every great Windmills band in one little moment. So what is frustrating about this song? Well, Jordy Greep does not sing on this song. Instead, album producer Seth Evans takes on the vocal role. I'm going to rant a bit, and I do mean no offense to Evans here. His voice is fine. It's a pretty alright voice I'd expect from the average post-punk group, and he doesn't make the song straight up bad, but like, why? Why not have Greep here? Knowing the vocal alternative from him being on every other track in the album, I'd rather have that. It's not like when Cameron Picton would sing on some Black Midi songs because there was always a different vibe between Greep songs and Picton songs. Motorbike being on the Jordy Greep solo album feels like a Greep song that Greep should be on. Also, frankly, I just think that Picton's voice is simply better than Evans. When I listen to Motorbike, I imagine Greep singing on it, and it just frustrates me. Like, why wasn't he here? He would have delivered these lines with thrice the emotion, and it would have been so much more consistent with, I don't know, the entire rest of the album. I mean, genuinely, why wasn't Greep on this track? His voice is so specific and unique, it's enough to sell an album such as this one to so many people, myself included. It's a primary quality of his music that makes it so special. Why the fuck would it not be on one of the album's highest instrumental peaks? Another Greepless moment that I'm more okay with is the instrumental interlude title track. I actually do quite enjoy this instrumental. I feel it's the best showcase of the new sound's instrumental identity. It's a jazz fusion banger that could have been ripped right out of the Herbie Hancock discography. Also, the muted funk electric guitars introduced halfway through are one of my favorite individual instrument moments, if not my absolute favorite, in the whole album. They provide me with sheer, immense joy that I cannot describe. This album's other interlude, which I'm a bit less positive about, is Bongo Season. It's not offensive in any way, nor is it really exciting. That's kind of the problem. It's just there. There's nothing to really say about it. Which brings me to this album's structure. The new sound feels way longer than it really is. Compared to the snappiness of every Black Midi album, this tends to drag on much more. There are many moments that I feel could have been shortened or just straight up cut. The skit at the end of Walk Up is meaningless and adds so little to the track other than an extra minute of time. As if Waltz meanders on and on after the vocals stop. The Magician is an amazing song, which is deserving of being the longest on the album, but it similarly drags on and just descends into meaningless madness after the vocals stop. The vocal climax of the song was so goddamn impactful, and beautiful, and perfect, and it just loses its punch by being followed by an instrumental mess. I feel bad spending most of this review complaining because I do really actually enjoy the new sound. I made sure to wait a long time before reviewing it because my feelings on it are very complicated and it took a long time to really put them into words. While it evolved the sound of Jordy Griep in many ways and has singles and moments which overshadow even Black Midi highlights, it also has many songs I simply forget about even with repeat listens, and I never feel any need to return to many of these songs individually other than the singles. It's Griep's vocal magnum opus, but in many cases a lyrical lowlight. I know many people will disagree with me, and kindly tell me why I'm wrong in that funny comment box down there. But the long and short of it is, I'm a biased critic. Every critic is inherently biased, that's kind of the whole point. This simply doesn't check as many boxes and do as much to excite me in particular as I had hoped. But I will still acknowledge its strengths and highlights and say it's a great album, just not as great as I feel it could have been. I'm going to give the new sound a score of 7 out of 10, and that is all.